to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
Hello once again, all Antiochian men in the Diocese of Miami in the Southeast. This is Michael Bocklig, and I'm back with another in our Ask Father Hans series. And I have with me Father Hans, as always. Good morning, Father Hans.
Good morning, Michael, and good morning, Antiochian men.
Let's get right to the next question, Father. So many people in our culture today have subscribed to a very flat, secular, materialist view of the world. How does this perspective negatively affect our spiritual lives, and what can we do to overcome this?
This is a really broad question, and it could be answered 100 different ways, but let's begin this. Let's define materialism, okay? When we say materialism and people are materialistic, most people will think that, okay, they think that people chasing stuff. Okay, they just want more stuff.
Right.
Bigger cars, fill the house with stuff. Okay, but that's not really what it is. Materialism means, in a philosophical sense, I would say it really bleeds over into the spiritual, is that nothing really exists except matter. Okay, material, matter. So in other words, if you can't put it under a microscope, if you can't quantify it with the tools that we have, it doesn't really exist.
Right.
And my answer to that is that, well, but look at your own life. Look at things like love, meaning, purpose, virtues, like behaving in particular ways. None of that is material. None of it's material. I can't take love and put it under a microscope and measure it, right? I can't take meaning and put it under a microscope and measure it. I can't. But yet these constituents of human experience are vital to human life. Because if the materialists are right, and they say that those things don't really exist, and that's what the materialist says, then all we are consumers, right? All we are eaters. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's the materialist worldview. Now that has been very strong, kind of on a subterranean level for a long, long time. And people will operate according to that which is not quantifiable is not really real. They won't think it through, but they'll just kind of live by it. That the only thing that you can measure the value of a man by is the stuff he has, right? And that the purpose of life is to acquire more stuff. And I mean, we just know that leads for a very shallow life. Those other constituents like meaning and love and purpose and the cultivation of virtue and all those things, that's actually what gives life its color, right? That's otherwise we live life according to kind of a static blueprint rather than, well, somebody said it to me once really well. They said, it's like living life in black and white when you're supposed to live it in color. That's really true. You're supposed to live it in color. You're supposed to see the color. You're supposed to see the beauty, right? You're supposed to actually drink those things in because they nourish the soul. But those things, they actually fade from view. So, a person who, here's where faith really comes in. Faith is absolutely essential to life, because what is faith? Faith is the evidence of things not seen. It's the substance of things hoped for. That's the way the Apostle Paul defines it in Scripture. Thus, the evidence, think about that clause, the evidence of things not seen. Well, how can it be evidentiary if you don't see it? Because you actually see it with the nous, the eyes of the heart, okay? And you might not be able to put those constituents under a microscope, but they're very much a part of human experience. They're very much comprehensible. They're very much experiential. And, you know, you could see that, okay, if somebody begins to become aware of this and starts cultivating it in their life, well, they become, and we say this in Orthodoxy a lot, they become more human. That's what happens. The first, I look back in my life, and the first, you know, I struggled with this a lot when I was a kid because I knew something was off. I really knew something was really, really off. I've always had that, even when I was a young kid, but I didn't understand what it was. I just knew that something was off. And one of the first people to really clue me into it was Mother Teresa. I read a quote by her, and she said, well, America is rich in things, but they're poor in spirit. Mm. And somehow those words, they just struck my heart. What does she mean, poor in spirit? What does she mean? And I started this whole thinking about this stuff and becoming more aware of it. And then the real danger of materialism as socially destructive came to me as I started reading Solzhenitsyn, and especially in his Harvard address, which in my history brought me to Orthodoxy. But when he was saying that the materialism of the East, of Marxism, communism, because Marxism as an ideology and a philosophy says that the only thing that is real is what is material, and thoughts and aspirations and all these other constituents I've defined are nothing more than what they call the ideal. They don't really exist. Thoughts themselves are emanations that have no substance, right? And he warned us that this was dominant in the West as well. After that speech, of course, he became persona non grata. And the reason he did was that this culture, especially the intelligentsia, was just not ready to deal with that truth. Yeah. And part of the reason it was not is because the deleterious effects of that materialism had not reached down into the culture yet. This was in 1976. I came across it when I was a college student in the library in the 80s. But it really got me to thinking, and of course now, 30 years later, it has permeated the culture, and we see its destructive effects all over the place. Because if we think that we're nothing but matter, then the only thing we have is our body. Because our body is material. It's not that matter is bad. It's that it's not the sole measure of what a man is. Now, we referenced the podcast episode 10, when we talked about feelings and materiality, which I thought was a very interesting discussion, because there is a certain materiality to feelings because you feel them in your body. Yeah. But if the only thing if the only thing that truly exists is matter, then the only ground of truth is your feelings. That's what happens. And I remember coming to that realization when I was younger, because I did this project at school, and we brought in a speaker, and the speaker was a great thinker and this and that. And I got to drive back to him I was going to University of Minnesota, and I got to drive back to Rochester, Minnesota, where he lived. And I remember saying, he was talking about something. I said, I know that's true. I can feel it. I said that. And as soon as I said that, I went, wait, something's off here. I was a kid, right? But so something's off here, because it's not true because I feel it. I feel it because it's true. Right. Right. There was a shift in my thinking that occurred. And yeah, but how do you know something is really true? It's just somebody's idea. Well, you know, you've got to work through this stuff. And I did. And thank God it brought me to Orthodoxy and all that. But the truth ultimately comes from the mouth of God. And that's why it's true. And someone will say, oh, you just believe that. Yes, I do believe that. But as I said at the outside, faith precedes everything. It precedes everything, because the organ of knowing, let's call it that, right, is really the heart. And Orthodoxy really understands that. Out of guard your heart with all diligence, says in Holy Scripture, for out of it are the issues of life. And we as Orthodox Christians understand that the nous, the real place of seeing, the real place of apprehending real knowledge that comes from God. You know, my words, even though heaven and earth shall pass away, my words will never pass away. It says in Scripture about God, that you apprehend and you experience those necessary constituents that make us fully human. And we are fully human when we are seeking our Creator, because the world is fundamentally relational, not isolationist. We are not stuff, we are being, right? Occurs ultimately in our encounter with God and our encounter with other people. Now, one of the benefits of this is it makes life really interesting. It really does. So every day, it doesn't matter what you do, because every day it's encounters with people. Every day is new, right? And because it's relational, right? And you start living this way, you become open to people. And when you're open to people, good things happen. It's just, life is rich. I'm not saying life is easy, but the anguish of the soul that a materialist outlook causes, the suffering, it's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. I mean, it leads to loneliness, isolation, breakdown, and the life of the spirit, which is a life cultivating those non-material constituents of human experience, actually presents a life that is creative and expansive, where you know, you're not out trying to save the world, right? But where you realize that you have a role in your little corner of it, no matter what you do, and that role is actually very important, because that relational dimension also reveals over time it's fundamentally creative. And if we relate to God, the faith, remember, is the foundation of everything. Even those who don't believe in God still operate on a foundation of faith. I'll get into that some other time. But that relational dimension with God, you realize that in your little corner of the world, which is a very important corner because you inhabit it, you become co-creators with Christ, like the Apostle Paul says. And that makes for a very interesting and compelling life. You know, it's a gift to be able to have life, and it's a gift to be free. I think sometimes, well, could I do this if I were in a gulag, or if I were falsely imprisoned or something like that? Could I do this in a prison cell? The answer is, yeah, I think you can. No matter how harsh the situation is, this is never, ever taken away from you, because it's fundamental to human existence and human life. The truth comes from God. God is the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And we need to shed our materialist assumptions, okay? We have to shed them, and we have to develop the spiritual life. Now, I joke around and I tell people, you know how, like you've seen, I've been to one AA meeting. I went with a friend once to support him. But I've seen it on TV, and, you know, hi, I'm Hans and I'm an alcoholic. And you say that, and that's how you introduce yourself to the group.
Right.
And I feel like I should go up to people and say, hi, I'm Hans. I'm a recovering materialist, right? I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm not, right? Because we're all coming out of this, aren't we, Michael?
Yeah, I
We
can
are
relate
all
to that.
coming
Yeah,
out of this,
I
right?
feel it too.
Yeah, and we are discovering what the ancients knew, right? They lived by this. And I think sometimes, you can find it in a place, you go to a monastery or something, and there they live this life in earnest, and it can be of great benefit to us, right? I don't live in a monastery. I live in the regular world. I live in the world, but I like living in the world, and that's where I belong. But the discovery of this is so liberating, and the joy that comes from that liberation is actually when you're in a position to help someone else as they're trying to climb out of this primordial ooze that was kind of like has been laid on us by the collapse of a culture, right? See, I'm going a little far afield, I understand this, but it's in some sense, it's a difficult time to be alive. It is. But it's also a great time to be alive because we have this gospel. We have this gospel. And Michael, I know that you're involved in this work a lot, as I am. And isn't it the most compelling thing to bring this light and this hope into the world?
Yeah, it truly is.
And especially as it's understood within our Orthodox faith, because it's so full. It's so comprehensive. It's so total. It's so total. When we begin to understand what orthodoxy is and how it is indeed the true church, that's not a polemical statement. That's just a statement of fact. All right. And we got issues and all this stuff. Yeah. Nothing's perfect. I get all that. But to be able to be called into this and then be called to work in it, what a great gift. What a great gift, because the joy that you receive by being able to bring someone some light, which brings healing to them, the word of truth. Every encounter with Christ is transformative. It's transformative. That's why we have to prepare ourselves to encounter him, because if we're not prepared for the transformation, to take on the responsibility and also to receive the gifts when they come, because sometimes it's just a blessing given to you, right? If we're not prepared for that, the transformation cannot occur, because we are co-creators with Christ, pulling ourselves out of the darkness, out of this ooze, bringing hope to many who are a lot like I was when I was younger, trying to figure out my way through the fog, but not knowing which direction to look or even which direction to walk, right? It's fundamentally in the heart. It really is. It's fundamentally a breaking with some of your assumptions. It's fundamentally putting off sins and habits and things like that. But the life of the Spirit, the life of truth, the light of cultivating those non-material constituents, the spiritual life, is well worth it.
Open to me the doors of repentance, O life giver, for my soul goes early to the temple of the